Can I say how delighted I am to be away from the calm of Westminster and Whitehall?
This is Kim, the 9-year-old Vietnam girl, her back ruined by napalm, and she awakened the conscience of a nation in America to begin to end the Vietnam War. This is Birham, who was the Ethiopian girl who launched Live Aid in the 1980s, 15 minutes away from death when she was rescued. And that picture of her being rescued is one that went round the world. This is Tiananmen Square. A man before a tank became a picture that became a symbol for the whole world of resistance. This next is the Sudanese girl, a few moments from death, a vulture hovering in the background, a picture that went round the world and shocked people into action on poverty. And this is Nida, the Iranian girl who was shot while at a demonstration with her father in Iran only a few weeks ago. And she is now the focus, rightly so, of the YouTube generation. And what do all these pictures and events have in common? What they have in common is what we see unlocks what we cannot see. What we see unlocks the invisible ties and bonds of sympathy that bring us together to become a human community. What these pictures demonstrate is that we do feel the pain of others, however distantly. What I think these pictures demonstrate is we do believe in something bigger than ourselves. What these pictures demonstrate is that there is a moral sense across all religions, across all faiths, across all continents, a moral sense that not only do we share the pain of others and believe in something bigger than ourselves, but we have a duty to act when we see things that are wrong that need righted, see injuries that need to be corrected, see problems that need to be rectified. There's a story about Olof Palme, the Swedish Prime Minister, going to see Ronald Reagan in America in the 1980s. And before he arrived, Ronald Reagan said, and he was the Swedish Social Democratic Prime Minister, "Isn't this man a communist?" And the reply was, "No, Mr. President, he's an anti-communist." And Ronald Reagan said, "I don't care what kind of communist he is." and Ronald Reagan asked Olof Palme, the Social Democratic Prime Minister of Sweden, "Well, what do you believe in? Do you want to abolish the rich?" And he said, "No, I want to abolish the poor. Our responsibility is to let everyone have the chance to realize the potential to the full." And I believe that there is a moral sense and a global ethic that commands attention from people of every religion and every faith and people of no faith. But I think what's new is that we now have the capacity to communicate instantaneously across frontiers, right across the world. We now have the capacity to find common ground with people whom we will never meet, but who we can meet through the internet and through all the modern means of communication. That we now have the capacity to organize and take collective action together to deal with a problem or an injustice that we want to deal with. And I believe that this makes this a unique age in human history, and it is the start of what I will call the creation of a truly global society. Go back 200 years, when the slave trade was under pressure from William Wilberforce and all the protesters. They protested across Britain. They won public opinion over a long period of time, but it took 24 years for the campaign to be successful. What could they have done with the pictures that they could have shown if they were able to use the modern means of communication to win people's hearts and minds? Or if you take Eglantine Jebb, the woman who created Save the Children 90 years ago, she was so appalled by what was happening in Austria as a result of the First World War and what was happening to children who were part of the defeated families of Austria, that in Britain she wanted to take action, but she had to go house to house, leaflet to leaflet, to get people to attend a rally in the Royal Albert Hall that eventually gave birth to Save the Children, an international organization that's now fully recognized as one of the great institutions in our land and in the world. But what more could she have done if she had the modern means of communications available to her to create a sense that the injustice that people saw had to be acted upon immediately? Now look at what's happened in the last 10 years. In Philippines in 2001, President Estrada, 1 million people texted each other about the corruption of that regime, eventually brought him down, and it was of course called the coup de text. Then you had in Zimbabwe, the first election under Robert Mugabe a year ago. Because people were able to take mobile phone photographs of what was happening at the polling stations, it was impossible for that premier to fix that election in the way that he wanted to do. Or take Burma and the monks that were blogging out, a country that nobody knew anything about what was happening until these blogs told the world that there was a repression that was meaning that lives were being lost and people were being persecuted, and Aung San Suu Kyi, who is one of the great prisoners of conscience of the world, had to be listened to. And then take Iran itself and what people are doing today, following what happened to Nida. People who are preventing the security services of Iran, finding those people who are blogging out of Iran, by everybody who is blogging changing their address to Tehran, Iran, and making it difficult for the security services. Now take, therefore, what modern technology is capable of, to the power of our moral sense, allied to the power of modern communications and our ability to organize internationally. That, in my view, gives us the first opportunity as a community to fundamentally change the world. Foreign policy can never be the same again. It cannot be run by elites. It's got to be run by listening to the public opinions of peoples who are blogging, who are communicating with each other around the world. Now, 200 years ago, the problem we had to solve was slavery. 150 years ago, I suppose the main problem in a country like ours was how young people, children, had the right to education. 100 years ago, in most countries in Europe, the pressure was for the right to vote. 50 years ago, the pressure was for the right to social security and welfare. In the last 50, 60 years, we've seen fascism, anti-Semitism, racism, apartheid, discrimination on the basis of sex and gender and sexuality. All these have come under pressure because of the campaigns that have been run by people to change the world. I was with Nelson Mandela a year ago when he was in London, and I was at a concert that he was attending to mark his birthday and for the creation of new resources for his foundation. And I was sitting next to Nelson Mandela, very privileged to do so, when Amy Winehouse came on to the stage. And Nelson Mandela was quite surprised at the appearance of this singer, and I was explaining to him, it took a bit of time, who she was and what she was up to. And Amy Winehouse said, Nelson Mandela and I have got a lot in common. He said, my husband too has spent a long time in prison. Anyway, Nelson Mandela then went down to the stage and he summarized the challenge for us all. He said in his lifetime he had climbed a great mountain, the mountain of challenging and then defeating racial oppression and defeating apartheid. But he said there was a greater challenge still ahead, the challenge of poverty, of climate change, global challenges that needed global solutions and needed the creation of a truly global society. Now, we are the first generation which is in a position to do this. Combine the power of a global ethic with the power of our ability to communicate and organize globally, with the challenges that we now face, most of which are global in their nature. Climate change cannot be solved in one country, but has got to be solved by the world working together. A financial crisis